Trends and fads are quick wins in the design world. They're popular, they're trendy, they're fun, they're cool, everybody loves them. So if you use things that are trendy in your designs for your brand, sure, everyone's gonna love it and think it's beautiful. And while it's important for your branding to appeal to people and also to not be all about what you like, but also what everybody else likes, just following trends is not going to create a long-lasting brand image and an identity that people are going to remember, and something that you're going to be able to be really consistent with and create that long-lasting, strong identity. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about creating a brand identity that is more timeless. This doesn't mean it has to be super traditional or fuddy-duddy and boring and bland, and it can't have any kind of trends whatsoever. And it also doesn't mean that it has to stand the test of time in terms of like your logo has to stay exactly the same for the next 100 years. What I mean is that it needs to be something that is long-lasting, and if it does have any changes, they need to be small little tweaks and updates, not complete overhauls. And that the overall feeling and vibe is always going to stay the same. Think about companies like Coca-Cola, Google, and Apple. Even though they've made tweaks and changes to their visual branding over time, there is an overall consistent feel, and things don't completely overhaul, but rather there's just small tweaks and changes, and the identity still remains similar enough that it's recognizable. It's more just an update, so it's a little bit more modernized, but we're not just, using a trend and then, oh, that's not cool anymore, so let's use today's trend. It's about creating something that has deeper meaning and then just modernizing it and making little adjustments over time so that it's still relevant. So first of all, let's look at what actually is the difference between a design trend and a fad, because they are slightly different things. And it's an important difference to be aware of when it comes to creating a brand design that is timeless, because it is okay to add some little trends into your designs because you want your design to be modern and relevant now. But if you're using fads, which are much more fleeting, they're the kind of things that are going to die very fast. But when you do use trends, it's very important that you're using them carefully and wisely, and that your branding does have greater depth to it, so that you've chosen that with purpose. So yes, trends are broader and longer lasting. It's more about that overall modern now feeling. Trends relate more to direction, the overall direction and feeling that design is going right now. Because remember, design isn't just about things looking beautiful. Design is about functionality. And so often design trends come about to meet current needs. So there's a trend towards designs that work well on mobile, for example. So these kind of really broad trends are actually more about practicality, and you do need to consider them in your design for your branding, because you want your branding to work for right now and what's going on in the world currently. So you do really need to think about those overall broad trends and how you can create something that works now but is also going to be adaptable later as things change. So something you really got to think about is making sure that your branding is going to be adaptable. So you're considering the today's trends, but you're not so obsessed with them to the point where when things change, you can't slightly adapt and change without having to do a complete new overhaul. Another example is that there's a trend at the moment towards more space. So things feeling a little bit more calm and a little bit more white space, because we're in such a busy, fast-paced environment at the moment where there's so much information coming at us that sometimes simplifying things makes things feel a little bit more calmer and more direct, and it's easier to get across your message when there's less going on. And so that minimalist look is quite a trend right now. But minimalism is a very broad trend, and that can mean so many different things. And so you can still have a very timeless look and go along with that modern trend. But then there's fads. These are more the quick, fast, fleeting things. They're where suddenly everyone gets into a particular font or a particular design style, and you suddenly see it everywhere to the point of oversaturation, and then everyone's over it and it dies off. You don't want to be doing those kind of things in your branding. You might want to use those kind of things for fun little promotions and that because it's fun, everyone loves it right now. But if you're doing that in your core branding, then you're going to have to be rebranding constantly, because it's quickly going to die off and go out of fashion. Everyone's going to be over it, and it's going to quickly look dated. And the last thing we want is for your branding to look dated. You want that more timeless feeling so that you can really last a longer time. The next thing you need to think about is don't waste your money. Remember, when it comes to branding, you're going to be either spending a lot of money or a lot of time to get it right. So that means you're either going to be hiring someone out and it's going to cost you a lot of money, or if you do it yourself, it's going to be a lot of a time investment to create that design work, create your logo, create your whole brand identity, and you don't want to waste that. Think about it. If you constantly tried to create a brand identity that was right now and really modern and all the latest trends and fads, then in a few months' time, it's not going to look so cool anymore, and you'll be like, right, let's do another update. And it's going to be costing you an awful lot of money and an awful lot of time. And not only that, but it's going to lose your audience too, because you're constantly chopping and changing, and so you're not creating that solid consistency, and consistency is what really is important here. So don't waste time on money on something that's going to look cool right now, but is quickly going to lose out and going to cause long-term pain for your business. Now, digging a bit deeper, if you want to create a timeless brand identity, then you need to start with story. You don't want to be starting with how do I want my brand to look, but rather you need to be starting with what do I want my brand to say. When you start with this, then you're not getting caught up in all those trends, because you're first thinking about what your design is actually communicating, the actual function of your brand design. So who is your audience? What do you want to say to them? How do you want to make them feel? What do you want them to remember about your brand? How do you want them to feel when they think about your brand? Really tap into that overall story and communication that you're trying to create and who you're really trying to connect with. Because when you start with that, then you really are going to create something timeless. Because even if you have to make adjustments over time, you're always going to keep to that same story. You're always going to have that same feeling about your branding, because that's what you started with. So make sure you have that solid foundation, that good starting point, and then you're always going to end up with a brand identity that is timeless. Another great way to keep your branding timeless is to keep the basics classic and then sprinkle in fads here and there. So what I mean by this is the core of your branding, things like your logo, the fonts you're choosing, and the colors you're choosing, those real core elements, make sure they're a little bit more classic. You want to involve a few broader trends, but overall you want something that is going to last you at least 10 years before you need to be doing any kind of tweaks. So really think about keeping those things classic. And then when it comes to things that can be a bit more fleeting, so things like social media graphics or promotional posters or some business cards, things that aren't so permanent in your branding, you can start to put maybe a few fads into those things. Of course, you still need to go back to that brand story and make sure it still sticks with that same feeling and vibe you're trying to put out there, but it's those areas that you can get a bit more playful. And then the core parts of your branding, that's when you really want to get more serious and keep it more timeless and classic. And if you come across a trend that you really love and think, oh, I want to do that, that's so much fun, be careful not to go off brand just because you want to try something out. So easy to come across some awesome template or find some really cool idea and you just really want to use it for your business. But if it doesn't fit with the rest of your branding, it's going to look really off and it's going to create this inconsistent identity. And it's so important to have consistency. So again, go back to try and keeping your basics classic and go back to having that initial story and communication, and always use them as your base and foundation when you're trying to make design decisions. And finally, remember that a unique brand is going to stand out far more than something that is the trend and all the rage right now. You might think a particular design style is so popular right now, and if you use that in your branding, then your brand's going to look really cool and everyone's going to love it and think it's so gorgeous, but it's not going to make you stand out. When you do something that's a little bit different and a bit more unique, that's what's really going to make your brand stand out. So while you need to consider those overall arching broad trends so that it's still modern and relevant, think about how you can make it a little bit more unique and different so it stands out from the crowd. And that's where you really go back to that story again. What things are you trying to communicate that maybe you can do in a unique way, where you're not just influenced by what everyone else is doing right now, but how can you communicate that? What's a fun and unique way that you can try and put that into your brand identity? Use your own design voice. try new things out. Consider who your audience is and what they're going to love, not just what the overall population is into right now, but what does your audience really resonate with. You want to create a brand identity that is timeless, iconic, and identifiable. So really what I'm asking you to do is think about the long game. Think about your branding in the long term, in the next 10, 20 years, not just about this week or this month and what's in right now, but really think how it's going to continue to look really beautiful, stunning, and memorable, and communicate your message and story for years to come. And if you want some more help with digging a little bit deeper into that brand story so you've got that solid foundation to start with, I have a free email course. You can find the link to that in the description below. Sign up to it and it will give you some great questions to get you thinking and start really digging deep about what actually do you want to communicate and who is your audience and who do you want to actually talk to? How do you want to make them feel? Because when you go through that process, you can't help but create something that's timeless because it's more about that identity and communication than about looking pretty. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and don't forget that if you want to learn more about branding, graphic design, and creativity, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.